Hello.
Hello. How are you, CW?
Right on, sister.
Excellent.
I'm doing good. How are you, Reeds?
You got buzzing crickets in my ear.
Crickets in the ear, right? Chirping away.
Got to just tame them sometimes. Not fun.
Nah.
But we have another podcast.
Yeah, we got a podcast. What do we got?
We have Elliot Kendall. He's our latest guest. You and I met Elliot when he was the director of radio and tour promotion, sales, and marketing for Universal Music.
Yep. Elliot's worked with some big names, including The Who, Kiss, Nirvana, Iron Maiden, the Kinks, Brian Wilson, Peter Frampton, Styx, and so many more.
Elliot now runs his own business, film and music promotion. He tells us the story of his career, along with some very cool rock and roll stories with the likes of Ringo Starr.
Pretty cool. Smokey Robinson and
Joe Satriani. Yeah, so it's just a master of all trades, Elliot. We love him. And there you go with our interview on Rock and Roll Confession. I was thinking, the scenario is we've been on the road, we've been traveling, you guys been doing your own stuff, every parts of the world, and we have yet another flight delay, and we happen to find ourselves in the same airport lounge, and it's like, Elliot Kendall, he reminds me of this Renaissance man.
Aww.
He's got like so many different things going on. I need to know more about him. So I'm in traveling in this airline that is having problems, like most of them are. I haven't been on an airplane, but anyway, we're sitting talking and getting to know Elliot Kendall. Who is Elliot Kendall?
I love the concept. And first of all, just to be hanging with you guys is just, comfort zone deluxe edition. I mean, just the rapport we have, the work we've done together, the work we've done separately. I've admired what you guys have done, recently and as far back as our roots. But thanks. And I will take it back to the top. So I am a Bay Area guy, like CW is.
Right on.
Berkeley, California, often had Marin County envy, but we can get to that later. And that's a good thing. But growing up in the Bay Area, it was a really amazing time to be there as a kid, as a teen. So roughly, like, my touchstone was like American Graffiti, and the American Graffiti soundtrack was kind of a groovy thing in the 70s when I was in high school. So I was turned on to Chuck Berry, Bill Haley, all this amazing doo-wop, the Wolfman Jack trip. And of course, that's a revival in itself, right? The whole American Graffiti thing. And then you can take it even further that, George Lucas filmed much of that over in Marin County, as
right down the street from me.
See, now I want to go there too. So, but anyway, so I'm fascinated by that soundtrack. But as a kid in high school, one of my best friends at the time said, "Hey, we really need to learn some of these songs on this soundtrack, and let's start a band." And, I probably started guitar at about 9 years old. I'll fast forward to, we ended up having this really fun rockabilly band that played Berkeley High School sock hops. We were called the Cadillac Kids. It was a blast. Everybody dressed up. And we actually did fundraisers so that some of the kids could join us on concert chorale tours. A lot of the musicians at Berkeley High were in the concert chorale. So they would sing in the concert chorale. We went to Europe. We'd go to the Grand Canyon one year, etc. Fast forward to just out of, I guess, toward the end of high school and then between times, I took guitar lessons from Joe Satriani. So imagine.
Seriously?
And Joe's from Long Island originally, and why he chose Berkeley in the Bay Area is really interesting. And I could do some reading into it, and I haven't seen him in years, but he taught guitar lessons out of a little guitar store on Grove Avenue, which is now called Martin Luther King Boulevard. But it was called Guitar Restoration. And he had a little room in the back. But then when we weren't doing guitar lessons, a lot of us would be hanging out. So it'd be like John Rubin from the Rubinoos, Michael Boyd, who's well-known, sort of ethereal, industrial commercials and soundtracks and things of that nature. All of us would be kind of hanging out and shooting the stuff. And, we'd play each other our demo tapes and things of that nature. But, to be able to watch Joe up close was almost like a brush with Coltrane. And I don't want to overstate it, but, you'd see him plug in. First of all, he never would play an electric guitar unless it was plugged in. He's like, that's not part of the equation. If you're going to play, if you're going to practice, don't noodle with it unplugged. It goes through the amplifier. That's part of the process. That's part of the character of the guitar. So it was just amazing to see him and his development at that time. And he probably had hundreds of students, Kirk Hammett of Metallica being one of them. Wow. But, Joe came to town and he was obviously a virtuoso, but this is before his solo career. And he started up a band called the Squares, which was recently re-released. But at the time, the Squares were like this interesting combination of like Todd Rundgren meets Van Halen, meets the Everly Brothers, meets the Romantics or something. Wow. It's like this power pop, incredibly tight, catchy songs. And it's out there on YouTube and Spotify. But it was like these wonderful sort of, and I say Todd Rundgren through a blender, but then Joe would take a solo and you would just be, you would go, there's something really special here. So I watched Joe develop through that. And my guitar style was more rockabilly power pop. So I wasn't really quite suited for being a virtuoso, but I still just was so hungry for the scene and so hungry for Bay Area music, that I saw Joe's band many, many times. My own band was sort of a rockabilly power pop hybrid thing. And I went on to open up for Huey Lewis and the News. We opened up for Y&T. We opened up for Del Shannon. We opened up for SVT. I don't know if you remember SVT, Eric Martin band at the time before he was in 415 and his other projects. So, the Bay Area was a great scene. And boy, did I get a schooling with Huey Lewis. We opened for Huey. They were so ready to go. It was second album, Picture This. So they had Do You Believe in Love in their pocket. And they were probably 4 months before they really started blowing up crazy. Sports was the album afterwards. Yep. But they sang a cappella vocals. They were so tight. Their light show, this is Keystone Berkeley, which, if you compare it to a club in Los Angeles, it's like, as small as maybe the Whiskey or the Troubadour, or even maybe smaller in some respect. But, I just got such a schooling from Huey. I almost hung up the guitar, but it was a great place to grow up. I went to SF State for 6 months and didn't like the dorm life and didn't really feel like I fit in. But the greatest part about that college was taking a class from Joel Selvin, who, of course, was our version of Robert Hilburn. You have Robert Hilburn down here, Robert Christgau, and some of these heavy-duty Dave Marsh. So
we had Joel on our podcast about a year ago, I think it was.
Yeah.
Right. You were kind enough to set up, by the way.
Well, thank you. And that's why this relationship with the three of us is so comfortable because, I try to project and think about what makes the most sense for you guys and what I can bring to the table that is the meeting of the minds and the meeting of the audience and, kind of checks all the boxes.
Sure.
But Joel was a compelling professor. He would...
Oh, wow, I can imagine.
He would spin a record in a lecture hall at SF State and then dance around to the record and then take the record off and say, okay, so tell me about Lieber and Stoller. Tell me about Burt Burns. He would actually put it on the audience and I would, sort of be the one guy kind of smart at it.
I know it all.
well, because I kind of knew my stuff, but come on, he's Joel Selvin. So at one point he said, what was the first production that Lieber and Stoller did? And of course, Lieber and Stoller are responsible for Elvis Presley, the Coasters, all this great stuff. And I sort of like, I think that's the Cheers, black denim trousers and motorcycle boots. And he kind of stopped, and did one of those. So look, that experience was remarkable, but I just was itching to get out and kind of make my way in the world. I loved the environment. San Francisco is an incredibly romantic city, but I couldn't wait to get out and play the clubs. And so I dropped out of SF State and started my own band, opened up for those bands I mentioned. And at some point you're like, where's the paycheck and where am I going? And, you're in your early 20s, at least I was. And I got a job at the Buttercup Bakery, college in Alcatraz. So you'd have, Greg Kinn would come in and he'd order a coffee and hang out and eat a donut for a while or whatever. You'd have these kind of cross sections. Angela Davis was one of our customers.
Wow.
It's just the most amazing thing. But where I'm going with this is it was a training ground for throw yourself in the soup. If you're a waiter, you can't hide in your shell. You have to come out. You have to learn how to deal with every kind of personality under the sun. So I did that. And instead of going to college and spending my parents' money, I socked away all the waiter buttercup dough and was concentrating on moving to Los Angeles. I just knew I was going to go. And eventually I did. Friends of mine were starting to get record deals. We're talking early 80s now. So friends of mine had a band called Candy, but it was Kyle Vincent on vocals, Gilby Clarke, who was later to join Guns N' Roses and Go for Thrills, and John Schubert was their drummer, and their bassist and main songwriter was Jonathan Daniel, who now heads up Crush Management. And Jonathan manages the likes of Weezer, and he manages Fall Out Boy and Green Day. And so anyway, just interesting how, all these things sort of
the connections. Yeah.
So the fast forward was, made it to Los Angeles, got another waiter job, and just started making demos and just started trying to ingratiate myself into the scene. I played the clubs. I ended up getting a really interesting cartoon soundtrack over in Europe. Was my first sort of, toehold. While I was a waiter, a writer for Rondor Music, which is Herb Alpert's publishing division. The restaurant that I got a job at was Hampton's on Highland. It was ideal because literally it was Fountain and DeLong Prairie and Highland. So you're right around all the TV studios. Yep. You're a stone's throw from A&M Records and the A&M studios. At the time, you had
Capitol.
EMI very close by, Capitol. Some of my customers included Joe Smith, who worked at Capitol, Hale Milgram, who worked at Capitol.
Joe Smith, really?
Right.
Joe Smith? Okay.
Yeah. So those kind of guys were my customers.
Yeah.
And I was the waiter with the demo tape and the apron. But you have to be careful and you have to be respectful.
Sure.
But in Los Angeles, at that waiter gig, I made more connections in 6 months than I could have ever made in San Francisco. And I adore the Bay Area. I'm going up to the Bay Area in a week. I visit my mom. I go up all the time. I just love the scene up there. But it just was fast forward down here, So, but, I did the best I could with my, whatever my skills are as a musician or were as a musician. So I was the guy hustling demo tapes around town. And, when I drop off a demo, I'd always sort of look and go, things don't work out. I can always do that, which is really kind of a pompous thing. But I just saw the record company thing as, if you are vicarious with any of the musicians you work with or the artists you work with, what some of the trappings are, how you'd like to be handled, how you'd like to be presented, treat it like it's a term paper every time. And we'll probably fast forward to Bob Coburn and Jim Ladd and some of those folks where, when you'd watch those folks at work and Rita Wilde, of course, you guys are preparing for this like it's the last day on the planet. You're over preparing. And, I remember seeing Coburn would have, paper after paper of just all kinds of deep information about whatever artist he was interviewing. So, anyway, it was fascinating to me. So not only did I and do I appreciate theater of the mind and what you guys bring to the table with your podcast, but, all these, remarkable radio folks that we've rubbed shoulders with that know how to get the most out of an artist and know how to set them at ease. And
right.
So back to
that's
the
a key
thing.
thing, Elliot. When you look at all the instances, all the situations we've been in, from me getting yelled at with Robert Plant and completely trashing me, it is getting those artists at ease, which is one of the key things, and one of the key things that you had to do later on, which we'll get to. But
Sure.
It's that they're in foreign lands everywhere they go. Every time they go to a radio station, every time they go to a venue, every time they go play, time they go to a party or a meet and greet, it's always foreign land. So to have to keep that kind of person, that kind of artist in a decent mental state, it's making sure that they're taken care of and they can rely on you to know that information and know what to do.
It's a great point. You really are the major domo, as they say. You're right. So you're kind of a part hybrid Secret Service man or woman. You're a runner. You're a gopher. And you're also the most prepared person in the room.
And a middleman that's going to take the hit so the artist doesn't.
That's right. And we've taken plenty of hits. And then guess what? As painful as they are on the day of, I'm going back to the waiter days, but I once dropped a bowl of soup in a guy's lap, right? So, here comes the soup, and the soup hits the table, and then the soup starts, and you're watching this in slow motion, right? And the guys are like, oh, it's hot soup. If you can survive that, you can survive anything.
I think maybe the lack of formal education helped you a lot in your observance of people, so that you almost got like a psychology degree by working with all the people that you work with and just learning about people and so forth. Because there's been a lot of times that, like you throw yourself into positions and it's just like, okay, be the calm one, know what's going on, answer the questions. It's like, whatever it is to set the music. Because some of those artists are batshit crazy. Let's be honest.
Yeah. Well, you have to be. Think about this. Not only are you driven, but you're talented and driven.
Yes.
So, I remember with Gene and Paul from Kiss, if you didn't have radio station listeners backstage at every tour, they were like, what happened? Like, they want to work. They can't wait to grip and grin and meet their fans and sign a bunch of stuff. And then they feel like they're covering all the bases. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
absolutely.
So I was fascinated by that. And just, I'm going to be the guy that's going to have respect for these people that we interact with, because, they're, as you mentioned, they're world travelers. They're on a plane. They've seen every version of Spinal Tap 40 times, right? Which is, it's nice. It's like we can, we can identify with what they do. We might not have, an inkling of their talent, but, in the case of me being a frustrated guitar player, a reasonable guitar player, at least I could talk shop. Yeah. And I'm going to fast forward a little bit to my condos in Culver City, very close to the former offices of KLOS. I had Brian Adams in for Mark and Brian. It was a great vibe. It was great. Seemed like it was just going to be Q&A and talk. And all of a sudden, Brian felt like playing. So, hey, I really need a guitar strap. I've got an acoustic, but I literally left during the commercial break, went to the condo, grabbed the guitar strap, came back, Brian strapped it on and went into some unplugged thing.
Oh my God. Just being ready, being prepared.
I just love the proximity thing. So the waiter years were just an incredible training ground. I mean, I waited on Maureen McCormick, Marcia of the Brady Bunch.
Oh, yeah.
I waited on Paul Stanley, as I may have mentioned. I waited on Kenny Loggins. I waited on Hale Milgram of Capitol Records. I waited on Joe Smith of Capitol Records. And I remember complimenting his book. He has this incredible book called Off the Record. And I said, Joe, I really loved your book Off the Record, which I bought in Berkeley back in the day. And he kind of gave me this look like, yeah, and here comes the demo tape. And the wife's like, oh, dear, isn't that nice? His wife was kind of making a fuss. He knows your book. And, But, at that point, the demo tape.
Wait. Did you give him a demo tape?
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, it's just establishing that rapport.
Well, I agree. I'm just,
but taking the shot at that one chance that you might have.
Guess what? And the owners of the restaurant knew all this. They knew that every waiter was a aspiring actor or actress or musician or had some hustle up their sleeve.
Of course.
But you know when to hold them and know when to fold them. We had the entire cast of Too Close for Comfort come in and sit at table 40. And it was like this, Ted Knight and the whole gang. And it's like this surreal moment. You're walking by with your cappuccino for table 16. And it's like, just kind of crazy, And Jim J. Bullock was a regular. I waited on Frank Zappa during his Congress years. So he had the short haircut.
Wow.
Yeah. And Sam Kinison was a regular. He would come in, and if he had a great meal, he would say, hey, thanks, man. And he'd palm you a 50 on your way out. So he was just a lovely guy. So, you kind of see, a little bit of a bird's eye, almost a Zelig existence. David Lee Roth would come in, he'd go to the salad bar, and he would pile up this like Mount Kilimanjaro stack of lettuce and beets and, all healthy stuff. Brian Wilson would come in, and, you just never know what you're going to get. But flash forward to, I had a late shift, right? So the lunch shift ends, and then you're kind of there between like 3 and 5, and then the dinner starts up at 6-ish. So I had a customer come in, and she was a professor with a UCLA extension course, but her day gig was Rondor Publishing. Like, she was working in publishing for real. And she had a bunch of papers out that looked like she was grading them. And I struck up a conversation. I said, oh, that's interesting. it looks like, songs or song. Oh, yes, I'm a staff writer. And so we started, nobody's in the restaurant.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
I'm there with my apron and making small talk. And she said, "Oh, so you must be a musician." I go, "Well, yeah, and I've been writing songs and doing this and that and the other. And, and I do my elevator pitch, it's a cross between this and this and this and this. Oh, I'd love to hear your music sometime." "Oh, thanks." Boom.
Yeah. Right there. Being prepared.
That was the one time. And very quickly that led to this animation show called Star Street that was European. And I split the publishing with the producer of the show. And, I got my first toehold into ASCAP. And I remember, getting paid and sort of buying my first CD player with the money later. So, it was all little baby steps. So I kept being a frustrated musician, played the Roxy, the Whiskey, the Coconut Teaser, FM station, etc. And I started getting liner notes gigs. So I'd write liner notes for Varese Sarabande, which is a well-known soundtrack label. But at the time, they had a really cool catalog division. And I'd write liner notes for Jan and Dean, for the High-Lows, for the Free Designs, some of the surf stuff. And I got my foot in that way. And at one point, Bob Keane at Delphi Records was having a revival because he had surf music in Pulp Fiction. So all of a sudden, Delphi had this influx of cash, right? And I knew some of the guys that worked at the label, some really great guys. And I came on board as a radio guy, knowing nothing about radio. But I was getting my feet right. I mean, just knowing that A, I loved it. B, growing up, I listened to Bob Coburn and I listened to Jim Ladd. And in the Bay Area, we had Camel. But, I always knew about the syndicated radio shows and everything. But I just, let's face it, I worship this stuff. So doing radio for Delphi was a real crash course because we had surf music, catalog stuff, Richie Valens, Bobby Fuller, some doo-wop. And this is like mid to late 90s. Bob, despite some of his reputation as to not paying some artists and maybe being a bit difficult, he took us to Maiden in France. So because I happened to have a passport ready, I hopped on a plane with Bob and a couple other staff guys, and we went to Maiden in France and had a whole booth. So my crash course in France with Bob Keane was getting him an Italian television network to come down and interview him, And we also went to Hong Kong. So, just some lucky steps here and there that give you a sense of performance, presentation, game. You got to think fast on your feet. You got to deal with artists. A label head like Bob, who's unusual, but, when he was appreciated, he lit up like a Christmas tree. So, I tried to watch and take notes mentally at least. And then I had sort of a dry period between Delphi and Universal where I scored one movie for Showtime, which was incredibly exciting. It's called The Effects of Magic. And it's Kathy Bates, Robert Carradine, Jacobo Morales, Kristen Minter, who at the time was one of the people on ER. But it was a fun romantic comedy, kind of a family picture about a magician. And Kathy Bates was the voice of a talking bunny. But literally, the director would say, we need kind of a lounge bachelor pad thing for this scene. We need sort of a surf thing. They're out by the jacuzzi. We need, a mambo or a tango. And so I would be able to fake all these. I worked with a really great orchestrator named James Sitterly, violinist orchestrator, but I was able to score this thing.
Wow.
And part of my low-dough deal was I got to keep all my publishing. And so when I was writing the cue sheets,
good for you.
You get.
That's one of those important things that I think by this time you would have learned that. Had it been the 60s, you wouldn't have gotten it.
100%. And because I was an ASCAP writer, someone very generous at ASCAP walked me through the process of filling out a cue sheet. So, she'd say, "Well, did you co-write this song?" "I co-wrote that one, but then I wrote this one 100%. And she walked me through the process. Any film is going to have, a good 20 or 30 or more cues, different musical cues. And there's a lot of music in this film, but so exhilarating to be able to hire my friends and to be able to work, with percussionists. One of the guys that worked on the film is Burley Drummond, who is with Ambrosia, but he did lots of session stuff.
Wow.
I got to hire just wonderful musicians, and that was incredible experience. That ended. I got my job back at Delphi. Then the Delphi gig ended, but on the last week I was working at Delphi, the phone rang. And it was my friend Gary Griffin, who's a brilliant keyboardist and been on the road with the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, He was one of the band members in Full House with John Stamos, which is where this phone call is going to go. So it was Gary Griffin and Alan Boyd on the phone. And Alan Boyd is the gentleman who tends to all of the Beach Boys archival tapes and is a filmmaker and a director himself. And these guys called me up and said, look, we've got this biopic that's going to be ABC Columbia TriStar, and it's a Beach Boys biopic. So they're going to be actors portraying the band in their younger years and the development of the characters. And they're going to cover, this era to this era. And we need you to be able to hire session musicians to portray the Wrecking Crew. And I think we're going to have you in the Wrecking Crew. And then you're also going to hire younger guys to be the Sun Rays, which is, a band that Murray Wilson later managed. Short story longer, my last week at Delphi, I was faxing my friends like the dress code and the information about how to get to the studios. And it was exciting, because I thought I was losing my, right? I thought I was losing my gig and basically going on the dole. And all of a sudden I got this amazing TV gig that was, and we filmed at United Western Studios. We filmed out in the Valley. And the movie is The Beach Boys, An American Family. It's from 2000. So you can find it out there.
That's not the one with John Cusack, is it?
Correct. It is not.
Okay.
That is Love. That's Love and Mercy, which came a good many
10 years later. Yeah.
Yeah. Easily, which is a brilliant film, perhaps a better film. But the point is, it was wonderful to sort of be in that label world and then that television world and to be able to book people and then get people paid and just watch the whole process. And after that, I did have a dry period. And then a friend of mine said, look, I think Universal is looking for a catalog radio guy. It's something they hadn't had before. They had their VP of publicity. And of course, that was going to sort of dictate how the marketing was going to go. But they really needed a radio person because what would happen is they'd have Melissa Etheridge's manager come in and say, look, I know we're putting out this deluxe edition, but what are you doing for radio? And they either wouldn't have a plan or they have sort of a plan or they'd have publicity kind of fake it. But my timing was great. And it was literally like running for office. I think it was a 6 or 9 month process where I have no idea who my competition was. I went on several callbacks. They would ask you questions like, well, if you're doing a Bob Marley campaign, and I didn't know much about reggae, but I knew enough, how would you do this? How would you approach it? And I said, well, I've got friends over at ABC Radio Networks and I've got friends I can delegate to. And I would pick up the phone and throw around the football and figure out who, where, what, when, how to pursue it, blah, blah, blah. They really wanted to see that you could be light on your feet and that you weren't just sort of stuck in one zone or one place, So really
adaptable.
Thank you. And what's the other word? Accountable, which no one is these days. But I went in with that mindset going, I'm the luckiest guy on the planet. And the music thing can wait, or it's sidebar, or I had very much fun. Thank you very much. But, now you're working, you're walking with giants. Let's be honest.
And it's all the stuff you loved, Elliot. Your life is music. Every post has to do with music, basically. And the fact that you got to fall into exactly what you love with bands that, because this is kind of back catalog stuff. This is kind of like the Universal's version of Rhino Records.
100%. Ding, ding, ding.
And so you already know it all, which is really helpful. It's not like you're taking a brand new band and like trying to sell it. You've got it, and now you know exactly where to go, where to take it, how to promote it, how to get it sold out there. So yeah, it's right up your alley. It's perfect.
Thank you. And it was, there was a lot of crash course stuff involved too.
Sure.
But the passion was what always saw me through. Going to SF State, I just didn't see a role for myself, and not to beat that drum. It might be great for other people. I know lots of times in executive positions, they require you to have a master's or at least be a college graduate. I never saw that path. And I was determined to either make my path, my way, not to be too cute about it, but I wanted it to eventually come to me, and it eventually did. But I had to make the right steps beforehand leading up, In the Bay Area, it's interesting. One of the bands I was in had a meeting with Bill Graham Presents and a well-known executive there, pretty legendary guy, Jerry Pompili, right? So Jerry sat us down and he goes, look, these demos are great. And I like that you guys are playing the circuit, the Keystone Berkeley, the Stone in San Francisco, Keystone Palo Alto. He's like, but you got to realize Eddie Money makes his first album. This is right around that time. He goes, Eddie makes his first album. He's got a hit. But at some point, you might not have the money coming in if you're not touring. A guy like Eddie, and I don't believe this really happened, but I think he saw this happen with a lot of the bands that Bill Graham represented. You might have to go back to that job pumping gas or packing groceries or whatever. Like, it was the greatest pep talk, and it was discouraging as hell, right?
Makes you fight for it more if that's what you want.
Honest integrity.
Yeah, and he's giving you some tough love, right?
No.
So
never
you know
hurts.
what I mean? It's the tough love, and it's but it was a real reality check, and we would see, we'd open up for Eric Martin Band, and you would see the sound guy joking with our manager and literally take his arm and roll the control knobs on the PA system to just screw our mix, So, and sometimes that's contractual. If you're opening up for headlining band, they will just screw you on lights, screw you on sound.
Because you got to make the headliner look good.
Well, yeah. And so, like my experience with Huey Lewis and the News, it was like, all of a sudden it's like, we did our set and it was a great set, and we enjoyed ourselves. Huey came out and it was like, the presentation was so ready. I don't even know. The only thing I can say is I was schooled, because everybody sang in like 5-part harmony. Everybody was so tight. Like, they just had the crowd in the palm of their hand for whatever 90 minutes that these guys played. And I had so much respect for them. And we shared a backstage. And Huey was the greatest guy. He's shooting the shuck with my brother. He's talking about his days as a carpenter. Huey, was a carpenter for many years. And of course, before the News, he had Clover. So he had all that experience behind him, some of the stuff in England. And the Mutt Lange connection is fascinating with Huey, because I believe Mutt worked on some of those Clover records. And then Mutt had Do You Believe in Love for the News. And then that was a big breakthrough for them. Wow. But to kind of watch how that guy operated, and then sort of kind of go back and try to regroup and try to think. But then I just kept moving, and I moved to Los Angeles. And, you kind of got to be here, I think. You just do.
But it's also, that was Huey's shtick, and he had it polished. But you can look at another band like a Guns N' Roses, who looks like a complete bunch of fuck-ups, and yet they're still successful.
Right.
So you know what?
It works.
It works, but it's also to each his own. And it's just, you make it or you break it. And if you've got a shtick that people follow, then you've done good. And you can't really compare yourself to other bands because everybody's so completely different.
Well stated. And I just thought, if I'm going to be the vicarious guy, well, let me help some of these other artists avoid some of the pitfalls. If I can help somehow, and I can still be like the rah guy and maybe talk a little bit of guitar. I mean, some of the nice things, when I had that radio gig at Universal, I brought on partnerships with Fender and Gibson. Right. And they weren't expecting that. They didn't know, like I made all the, I reached out to Fender, had to go through 4 or 5 guys. Then I found my guy,
Del,
who I'm sure the two of you know about, Del Breckenfeld, who's got his own partnership business now, and is just, he's one of those guys that if you meet the right combination of people, you can make some real magic. Del and I, while he was at Fender and while I was at Universal, we did custom guitars for Alice Cooper. We did a Sting bass. We did a super deal for Elvis Costello, where Elvis got this phenomenal guitar and Fender got to do a signature model. Elvis's manager got styled. There was cash involved, and then we did some stuff with the Nirvana estate. I remember one of the other things was we did a Gretsch George Harrison guitar commemorative thing, and RollingStone.com hosted the contest, and it blew up the site. The entries were so off the charts. So, I like to think I'm that guy that's going to connect the dots, that's going to try to make it fun and try to keep it exciting. And, after Universal, of course, I did the Fender Telecaster with the Wrecking Crew documentary, so I try to do those sort of things where it's like, oh, that's a little bit of sizzle. That's a little different. Well, then we'll give away that guitar at Amoeba, and Amoeba will give us this amazing display. And, so things would snowball, and that's always what you hope when you have the idea or the vision, that other people will agree, jump on board, add their special spice, and then you come up with something that's way better than you could have even thought of. So,
yeah.
A lot of times when you're talking, you say that, you were lucky. You were lucky Yeah, you were in the right place at the right time at several times, but also, you knew what to do at that moment. I mean, that's the thing that, I find striking is that a lot of people might be in that position as well, but oh man, I've got this tonight, I've got that tonight. You just kind of like said, what do you need? And we're always available and, had those ideas and those sparks that caught fire. And I love it. I love
Thank
it.
you. I feel like, especially our time together, the three of us, it's like when we made eye contact, I remember the first time I met CW was at a Mark and Brian event in the South Bay. And it's just funny because I think he just thought I was a stalker and a crazy fan. And I had just gotten, and he's right? He's absolutely right. But I just gotten the gig and I was like, somebody probably in a market meeting said, hey, so how's your relationship with KLOS? And I was like, all right, fine. So I was determined to bust in and either break into the building or somehow meet you guys. And it helps with your universal globe behind you.
Sure.
The Jerry Maguire thing where, you've got the power of the corporation behind you. And you guys, in meeting me, I assume that you would think, well, he's probably got some good artists that he's dealing with that we wouldn't mind having on air or having whatever, some kind of relationship partnership with. But I remember in meeting CW, I was just determined. I just gotten the Universal job. I just thought, I don't know how I'm going to meet these people at KLOS, but I'm going to meet them and I'm going to share my release schedule with them and see if something clicks. And at some point, sooner or later, they're going to like what I'm doing and we'll be able to set up interviews and do whatever. And I can't even remember what the first one was, but off the top of my head with, the three of us and KLOS, it had to be Def Leppard, Scorpions, Iron Maiden, all the guitar stuff, Bryan Adams, Tears for Fears for the morning show, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe you guys have a better memory.
No, I really don't, Elliot.
Neither do I.
All I know is we did a whole bunch of, I know we did a great one with the Scorpions it was at the Universal Amphitheater where everybody that won tickets got to go to the sound check. And then the guys, the band is such a cool band and they all came out afterwards and they come out onto the floor and they just like talked to everybody and signed autographs and took pictures. And again, that's one of those really cool moments where we didn't have the full expectation that they were going to meet the band, but this was such a cool thing to go to the sound check in the first place. But then on top of it, again, like I say, there have always been such a graceful, great band that they would come out and just say hi and hang for like 20 minutes, just meeting everybody and doing whatever needed to be done.
I think part of that is we're fans, basically, all of us.
Sure.
And we do and did our jobs the way a fan would, and we were lucky and fortunate, but it was that enthusiasm, and Elliot, you've always had that enthusiasm, which is great.
Thank you. I hope it still counts in the year 2022.
Well, I don't know, man.
I think the three of us are the poster power trio for reinvention. Because you really have to, everybody's going to have that Jerry Maguire moment where you turn around, who's coming with me? And, you realize on the outside, you're basically opening up your lemonade stand every 5 minutes. And that's how I refer to it with my present business. That being said, after my Universal job, I landed the Tower Records documentary, All Things Must Pass, directed by Colin Hanks. Olivia Harrison allowed them to use the George Harrison song, All Things Must Pass, for the finale of the film. I was working with Gravitas Ventures, and they were, very feisty studio distributor. But, to get Colin Hanks, it's like, okay, we're not messing around. Like, we really have to do some interesting things. I cold pitched them. I emailed them. I said, hey, I used to work for Universal. I think I could bring A, B, C, D, and E to the table. And 3 weeks went by. I thought they'd forgotten all about it. And they got back to me and said, hey, we haven't forgotten about you. We'd like to have you in. And, how about such a date? I mean, at that point, it's a cold call. You're like the vacuum cleaner salesman coming in and you've got your Hoover and you throw the dirt on their carpet and go, watch how my Hoover works, So
you suck.
I remember walking into that meeting and, these are all strangers. but I brought my show and tell, and I said, I do some guitar partnerships. And I think with the Tower Records thing, people have this, sentimental attachment to a record store, but they do. It just, it emanated from California. I think Colin had such vision for being a Sacramento guy to begin with, but to know what Tower meant to the community of Sacramento. And then the fact that they were a mom and pop that just blew up, and let's hope that can happen in 2022. But at some point you look at that and go, that's special. And that's a human interest story. So back to the meeting, I dazzled and I did my best with my show and tell, but I also said, I think for your social media campaign, you should have, I think I can get you some rock stars and I can get you quotes from rock stars. So probably the most they'll provide is an amazing photo still or an in-concert shot and some great quote about how they felt about Tower Records. And my first stop was Joe Elliott of Def Leppard. And I remember writing that email and copying his manager and saying, hey, Joe, I'm doing the reinvention thing post-Universal, literally Jerry Maguire moment, right? And, I'd love to get a quote from you if you have any feelings about Tower Records. And basically the idea is a great quote and an amazing photo. And we put the quote and the photo together and it's an Instagram campaign and we're off to the races. This is sort of before the Facebook stories and those kinds of things where it was actual motion. It was just like, let's do some still shots that can be shared socially. This is, early, 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. So Joe gets back to me within 20 minutes. I'm not kidding. And he wrote me the most eloquent, touching, amazing thing I'm getting a little choked up for this documentary because I didn't know that I could pull this off. And without the muscle of the corporation behind you and the 401k and the corporate card and the product and all these other perks and the biggest artists on the planet, you're literally, once again, opening up the lemonade stand. Joe was the first guy to go. Not only did he remember me because we were buds, we were like collector trader guys when I would see him during the Universal time, but he gave me the most gold-plated, amazing quote and a stunning Ross Halfin live photo. And, I turned that into Gravitas Ventures. And I think they were stunned because number one, they probably thought I was, full of it. And number two, that was the first of many. And I came back with, Brian Wilson quote and Rick Springfield quote and Gary Calamar from KCRW and Mike McVeigh. And, I sort of did a cross section of media people and rock stars and Frampton, and just anybody I could sort of think of that I had good dealings with at Universal that would still throw a favor to me. Alice Cooper, Shep Gordon kind of was like, oh yeah, what do you want it for? And what's going on? But he came through for me. So, you're always walking that fine line, like, can I pull this off? Yes, I can. And thanks to the generosity of these guys, so.
That's cool.
I saw something that you are like promoting now of some festivals in Huntington Beach. Can you tell us about that?
So I'm a surf music nut. So everything from the instrumental side, the Dick Dale stuff and all those great bands to the Beach Boys and some of the vocal stuff too. But there's a surf instrumental festival called Surf Guitar 101. And the promoter is a gentleman named Jeff Hansen. And he is so passionate. He's done this year after year after year. He'll time it with Tiki Oasis, which is a San Diego event, which, the Tiki crowd and the Exotica crowd and the surf crowd and the rockabilly crowd, there's some crossover there. And there's some sort of, synergy that they use when they're booking bands. So what Jeff did for years is he would do a Surf Guitar 101 festival, maybe the week before Tiki Oasis in San Diego. So that if you have a band coming from another country to play Surf Guitar 101, they also have an opportunity to book a gig the following week at Tiki Oasis and then maybe book local shows as well. So in a nutshell, it's this wonderful all instrumental bands festival that they throw, and they're starting to bring it back this year as well. So if you go on any of your favorite social media platforms, just look for Surf Guitar 101 or SG 101 for more information. But thanks for bringing that up.
Cool.
That's cool. Elliot, I know we talked a while ago. Was it Dave Davies? Is that happening?
Yes. So Dave, when I work with the Kinks, and I've done so, I believe 3 times, mono box set, Village Green, There was a mono collection, and then I believe they've got a Muswell Hillbillies coming up. And our mutual friend Andrew Sandoval is almost always involved in the reissue of those Kinks box sets, the unreleased stuff, and dealing with Ray directly, and sometimes Ray and Dave, et cetera. But what I do normally when I'm hired by BMG to work with the Kinks is I'll set up interviews for Ray and or Dave. And these might be everything from Sirius XM to an iHeart radio tour, which is like a national thing that they connect all the stations for you, to podcasts, various podcasts.
To Rock and Roll Confessional podcast.
One of my favorites. So you guys are like my go-to for those. So if I can bring you the likes of, Dave Davies and those folks, and I know sometimes you've been very sweet about maybe, blending the genres or softening the genres on the strict rock stuff, because I work a lot of unusual artists that may, not fit in everybody's straitjacket. Gilbert O'Sullivan has this brand new record, Driven, that's coming out from BMG July 22nd. And he's done a single with KT Tunstall. So, sometimes you work sometimes you can't always choose your clients. And sometimes that's a good thing, because you don't develop tunnel vision and you learn to be fast on your feet. I just worked Smith Kotzen, their West Coast tour, and it's Adrian Smith from Iron Maiden, and it's Richie Kotzen from the Winery Dogs. And these guys put out this blistering, great kind of bluesy classic rock record through BMG. And they had a West Coast tour, and I was literally sort of the last guy brought on. I did some work for them the year prior. But, I would have to book last minute radio interviews in each of the tour markets. So it might be Sacramento, it might be San Luis Obispo, it might be San Diego. But, podcasts can do a version of that, but they can't be targeted locally the way those are.
Right.
You can do the boosts and sort of do the, pay for those boosts on socials. But nothing beats like an actual jock talking to an actual rock star about a show that's happening right down the road.
Yeah, if it's a show you're promoting, podcasts are not the best. If it's an album you're promoting, those can be found anywhere in the world. So, and downloaded. You don't even have to wait. It's all downloaded at the same time. So, yeah, it makes a lot more sense to go to a podcast for that.
And streaming, I find that some on the non-commercial side, some of the stations, prefer vinyl, which is pricey for labels to make these days, right?
And it's pricey to buy. Are you kidding me? Yeah. Like I'm looking at, I was looking at the list for Record Store Day, which I think is in a week or so, and I'm like, some of these single 12-inch discs are like $34. Like I think
$35.
Red Hot Chili Peppers, I think, was $34.99 or something.
Yeah.
I'm like, God, what happened to the $4.99 days?
And, I saw the period at Universal when they sold their vinyl plants. So that they sold their vinyl pressing plants. And then when vinyl became a hip thing, they had to go back to those factories that they sold and pay full price along with everybody else, or cut their sweetheart deals. But, it was like they thought CDs are here to stay and vinyl's history.
Right.
And you can't blame them.
No, that's what it looked like it was going.
Yeah, it's remarkable. But from here, for example, last night was report night. And as you guys know, my lovely mate of 14 plus supremely wonderful years, Crystal Ann Lay of MM Music, is a non-commercial Americana radio specialist. So while I'm working Keith Richards' definitive Main Offender deluxe box set and working the live in 82 Expensive Winos tracks, she'll be side by side. We've got our laptops, and she might be in the living room or whatever, but she'll be working the likes of Bonnie Raitt and Neil Young, and she worked the most recent George Harrison box set. She works new interesting artists like Art Deco and Sophie Tufker, and so it's a fun couple thing where you can talk shop with your mate on report night. So I'm working. Keith
you guys
Richards.
Are like a perfect mirror.
Oh, that's sweet.
Of each other.
Love it.
It is a bit of kismet, and I'll say it's so nice when you're doing your reinvention and you're with someone who understands what you're trying to do. And not only that, but can actually share information and talk shop. And, oh, do you have an email for that programmer? Oh, what about that show host? Oh, yeah. So we're constantly throwing it back and forth. It's like, trading baseball cards. It's a blast.
Yeah.
But she'll be working singer-songwriter Charlie Winton, and I'll be working Gilbert O'Sullivan. Last night, like I say, I was working the live tracks for Keith Richards. And, everything's a challenge. Even an artist like Keith Richards with live material, as constricted as classic rock is these days, you're going to some really unusual and interesting places for your airplay.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, so let's play this spin game, and let's, Universal, the 12-year run, I have a little arc where like the first 5 years, it was like, oh my God, we have a radio guy for catalog. And then it was like, okay, yeah, we got this, this is all good. And toward the end of my run, it would be like, radio doesn't sell records. I actually had one of the accountants say that in one of our meetings. And I jokingly said, well, there goes my job security. And I was fine for another year and change and whatever. But at the same point, it's like, so why vilify one form of media? I mean, of course, everything's always going to change. And thankfully, like I say, the theater of the mind thing, which is, our dopamine dose, right? Where, someone talks about something and the subject matter we're interested in. So that makes us tune in or listen. But it was just so interesting to see, this art form that I loved be a little bit vilified by some of the numbers guys.
Yeah.
So, we're still kind of fighting that a little bit on the outside and, with what we do. But in the case of Keith Richards, you're going for strictly spins and it's live material. You got to dig deep. You got to twist some arms. You got to go to non-commercial radio, AAA, blues shows, Sirius XM, etc. Like I will go to all those wide-reaching places for all the artists I'm working, whether it's a Kinks unreleased track, a John Fogerty thing, etc.
Wait, I have a question for Rita. Rita, as music and program director, and as much as I can remember, live music, live versions of songs were never popular for radio for the most part. I mean, we've got Frampton and that kind of stuff. And I'm wondering why, because to me, I love hearing a live album. If it's a true live, for the most part, a true live album, like a Frampton Comes Alive, like that was really exciting to hear. Why didn't radio embellish? Why didn't they pick up live music like that?
I think that a lot of times that if somebody is used to hearing a song a certain way, that's the way that they want to hear it. And it all goes back to music testing and music research and, why radio plays the same 350 songs. We're aware of that. We know that is happening, but it's just like counting beans. It's following the math of, yes, you've got these listeners here. They like this, but then if you stretched it out a little bit, they're going to sway. And if you've got competition, another radio station that's going to play the actual track of that, you're going to lose out. And I think everybody lost out with the congressional act that took away the mom and pop ownership of radio stations. And we've got to get back to that because that's the spark plug. It's people talking about it, like we're talking about, just how everything is and we love it. And I think there's a lot of people that miss it. But in today's world, it's all TikTok, it's like 15 seconds and it's like, attention spans.
Yeah, short attention span stuff.
But I mean, you go on YouTube and you find some great stuff. I mean, I've got great recorded stuff with like Springsteen and U2 and all these other bands. But, it's just, it was not enough money was not put behind it. Enough pressure was not put behind it from some of the record companies. Yep. But then you had something that was different, then you got the MTV Unplugged, which was great because it had different versions of songs. You had like Jackson Browne recording an album running on empty, all live, all over on his tour bus and his hotel room and stuff like that. So there are different ways to do it. But, unfortunately, so many of the things in entertainment these days just comes down to money, and it's just, you're stripping all the art. You're stripping the passion, the enthusiasm. Right. It still exists because, I mean, we're around and we have people listening to this podcast. And obviously, Elliot, you do a lot of things and see a lot of people, and that fire's still burning, but it's just not spotlighted right now. Yeah,
you just have to modify the fire, I guess, I mean.
Yeah, get creative on doing things,
try to shuffle the deck a little bit. Following Universal, I was just determined to figure out social media. Not that I'm an expert, but just that I was going to participate. Yeah. I've never been a shy guy. It goes back to being the waiter and being thrown in the apron and figure out all these different personalities that you're going to wait on, because you're going to meet some real tough and quick characters, so, in the socials, it's like, I'm constantly posting about my clients on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and some people will see that and go, well, I need that for my client or my artist, or, let's hope that a manager sees that, for every Keith Richards, there's somebody else undiscovered, Charlie Winton, who's got a really interesting story and a really interesting record, produced by Scott Matthews, who is known for the Durocs up in our beloved Bay Area. So, you want to be able to try to, balance those two, I think, and then, get good clients. I honestly can't work a project that I'm not in love with. Sorry. I guess I'll starve first, but, I have to really appreciate it.
How does anybody get in contact with you? Say like somebody's got like, oh man, I got this band that's just awesome. It's just awesome. Yeah. They're just waiting for the break. How does somebody get in touch with you?
I'm on the 4 basic food groups. So LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. LinkedIn is probably the most professional, where you can see all the clients I've dealt with. You can see some of my adventures, some of the crazy guitar partnerships I've done. I'll be posting some of the media hits that maybe my PR counterparts have done for like Keith Richards. So if Keith Richards has done an interview with Mark Maron, I'll be posting about it because I want my programmers to see like, oh, well, Keith's really out there doing stuff. And this is, timely. And let's try playing some of those live tracks, on a weekend show, on a syndicated show, on a Sunday night show. Keith and his manager and his longtime publicist did such an amazing job at setting up this box set. And this box set is just gorgeous. I mean, there's unboxing videos out there where, the vinyl comes out, and there's a guitar pick, and there's, all kinds of different memorabilia associated with it. But they did a big setup with Sirius XM. But then my job, what didn't they do with Sirius XM? So I'm the guy that goes in after the fact and tries to make sure that the Spectrum channel had a shot at playing a couple of tracks. Yeah. I'll go after our dear friend Bob Buckman. I'll go after Little Steven's Underground Garage. Hey guys, are you looking at any of these live tracks? That kind of thing. So
yeah, that's awesome.
I have to duck and dodge and, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's the only place where, you can hear a lot of new exciting things is, Sirius XM these days and all their different channels, Yeah.
You have to be equal opportunity. Yep. When I give my elevator pitch, Sirius XM is at the top of the tree because I do feel pretty strong comfort zone with a great number of the staff there. Not only the talent booker, but many of the hosts, and many of the producers of the hosts and the bookers that might be interested in a book author like Joel Selvin, those types of shows. But you have to be able to be a little bit versatile. And the podcast world I just adore, and you guys are way at the top of my list just because of our sensibility for artists and our sensibility for storytelling. But I like that, you could share the link of that podcast on social media right when it happens. But then 3 weeks later, you go, hey, did you miss so-and-so, author of so-and-so book on Rock and Roll Confessional? Have a look at what Rita and CW, had to say with fill in the blank. It's kind of nice that you can do that. And in a sense, you wag the dog a little bit,
It's kind of there forever.
Right, exactly. So that part of it we've never had before. We always had sort of instant gratification and then gone.
Elliot, give me the best and worst artist to work with that you worked with.
I'm going to give you a phenomenal. I can give you a couple. I'm going to start with Stevie Wonder and Smokey Robinson. So Smokey had us out to lunch, and he had this wonderful record that was standards. So literally, Smokey is doing Cole Porter. He's doing things of that, those incredible songwriters. And we're at a lunch in Beverly Hills, and there's really only a handful of us. I mean, it's the publicity team, it's myself, it's marketing. And, you're hearing everything he's saying, and he's listening to you. And he starts talking about the Beatles.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not going to do my Smokey impression because but he has a wonderful speaking voice. And he's talking about how much admiration he had for the Beatles. And those guys would, they were talking Tamla Motown and Miracles. And they're always, in interviews, the Beatles were always very specific about how much they adored Motown, how much they adored Smokey and all the other artists on the label. And you could just hear, like, it just warmed you to think about how this still resonated, in the mid 2000s with Smokey, enough to tell us about it. And he was telling us about having dinner with Bob Dylan, just golden moments that you just can't even imagine yourself in. So flash forward, same album, Stevie Wonder had the morning show on KJLH, here in Los Angeles. And Smokey was going down to promote his new Standards record. And, I got there and, like always, you just want to make sure you're as prepared as possible and, you're ready for anything. And we had our head of publicity there and she had brought a photographer. And these guys, you put them in and it's just automatic pilot. Like I didn't have to do a thing. Because, immediately Stevie had a keyboard on the show. So he's like, telling his producer, like, cue up Cruisin', meaning Smokey Robinson's Cruisin'. So, because he just in his mind, he's like, oh, I love that Smokey song. Let me do some noodling on it. And he's doing solos along with, like, he's jamming with the track and Smokey's laughing his, tail off with this stuff. So just to watch those giants. And then at the end, I got a picture with these guys. So, those are golden moments. But to sort of go where CW is going, Ringo Starr, World Cafe, which is at the time it was hosted by David Dye, big syndicated radio program based out of Philadelphia, WXPN. And David Dye was hosting, but he was in Philly. And we rented a studio at the time. They had ISDN lines, which was high quality audio for the time. Before
were they phone lines?
They're like super phone lines. I mean, this is before Zoom. Now with Zoom, it's remarkable what we can do, right?
Right.
But at the time, it was like you had to get an ISDN engineer. You had to know what you're doing for perfect, clean fidelity, especially for a big show like that, for Rockline, for any of those. But we had World Cafe and we had Ringo with World Cafe. So literally, we rented out Village Recorders. And it was coming down rain. And I'm always the guy that drives by the studio night before. Did I get the right address? Yeah. Where's the entrance? You have to be
pre-plan it. Yeah.
I'm just, that's my nature. And I'm not bragging. It's just like, it's based out of fear because I don't want to screw up,
Sure.
I want these guys to have smooth sailing and then it be magical with the interview. And then, boom. So it's coming down buckets of rain. I see an SUV come by. I make eye contact with the driver. The driver kind of gives me a nod, like, yeah, like you're hoping it's the right car. Okay.
Right.
And it's coming down buckets. And literally my gig at that moment was umbrella guy for Ringo, gets out of the SUV. I walk him to the door at Village Recorders. And so far, so good. Right. Door opens up. There's probably about 4 or 5 people in the lobby of Village. And they all look up and it's frickin' Ringo Starr, and he makes a quip. He's like, where are the girls? And the complete icebreaker. The room falls apart. They laugh. We go upstairs and we do our interview. And the interview's going great. Ringo has his publicist with him. And, Village Recorders is one of those studios where, Fleetwood
Magic
Mac
happened. Yeah.
Thank you. So Fleetwood Mac, I mean, you could name a dozen amazing records that happened at Village Recorders and still do to this day. And I believe the owner's name is Jeff, and he's a great guy, and he's coming up in a minute. So Ringo does his World Cafe. The ISDN connection's great. David Dye's very happy. We're promoting one of Ringo's new albums, and I believe it was Why Not, like the letter Y and not was around that time. And owner of the studio, Jeff, comes upstairs and says, Ringo, Elton's downstairs in Studio 2. He'd like to say hello.
Wow.
So, we all kind of look at each other. It's literally just the three of us. It's myself, it's Ringo's publicist, and it's Ringo. So we hop down the stairs, and there's Elton looking completely fabulous, like wearing a, I'm trying to think of how to describe this designer leisure suit, track suit. But like gorgeous, like couture, couture. I'm trying to think of the right description. But he's Elton frickin' John, and he's got his guy, his handler there. And, and Ringo comes in like singing a Rat Pack song. Wow. So obviously these guys have the most insane history.
Sure.
And they start catching up, and they're having their moment. And Ringo says, "What brings you here to Village?" And Elton says, "Well, I'm here working on my latest album with Leon Russell." And oh, great. Well, great. How about you? What are you here for? Well, and this is the first time I've ever seen Ringo snap his fingers. But he says, "Well, I'm here working my new album for Universal." And the publicist runs out of the room, and I'm prepared. I've got the vinyl, I've got the CD, I've got everything else. So my moment was handing the CD to Elton John. Elton's looking at Ringo, does not break his eye contact with Ringo, takes the CD, looks at it, great. And at that moment, I realize it's their time. You've got to know when to leave. You've got to know when to leave the room. And I've had this opportunity with Peter Frampton before and many others, but just know when to get out of Dodge. So I said to the publicist, "Hey, I'll see you guys later." We had a rock line, I think, that night. And I said, "I'll see you at Rockline. Thanks very much. Goodbye." Boom. It's their moment. These guys want to catch up, And then that night at Rockline, he did Bob Coburn, and that was sensational. And guys would pop out of the bushes because they wanted him to sign stuff for eBay. I mean, that was the Rockline thing where we had, I'm trying to think of, you'd have, Chris Cornell did a solo record, and guys were hopping out of the bushes, and he'd sign everything. So anyway, it was a very fascinating time. But what I learned from that was later, when Ringo played the Greek Theater, he said, "Look, I only want people who worked on the record on the guest list." And there were other big executives saying, I mean, guys that had titles way bigger than me.
Yeah.
But it was literally like maybe 3 or 4 of us that went to the gig, because he just wanted those people that, were really in the weeds on the record. So just kind of a nice, maybe lesson learned, and just like know when to treat them like human beings and get out of Dodge.
Who's the worst band? If you feel comfortable.
Or the worst experience. Because
I don't know that. Oh, all right. The
Kiss.
Band will go on. No, those guys were dynamite.
They're very professional. Yes.
All right. Listen, I'm going to go on record as saying, because I'm not, I wasn't well versed in Kiss, but I always respected the game.
Yeah.
The game is sensational.
It's intense. It's very intense.
It's a couple of guys that made this stuff up. And in Gene, you had a comic book fan that wanted to become
superhero,
right? And he not only did he pull it off, but he pulled it off great. And the partnership things and the other ideas that sort of sparked just from the fact that it's a band with the makeup that did it to the nth degree. You know what I mean? They didn't settle. There's so much you could say about those guys, but Gene did an appearance for me. He did a keynote speaker at the Tongle Awards for free.
Wow.
And this was post-Universal. But
that F word, he doesn't use that F word very often.
I approached management. I described what the company did. I said, "We've got Fender partnership, and they're going to bring some guitars for the walls, and there'll probably be a couple hundred people, and blah, blah, blah." And he came and gave the keynote, and he was wonderful. And we had, basically a free Tongle campaign on the platter for Kiss whenever they wanted it. But you don't forget things like that, right. that he wanted to work his tail off. But no, I had fantastic experiences with those guys.
Oh, don't be sorry.
Same here.
No,
Same here.
I haven't had a hard time either. I just see him very much as a businessman,
Yep.
All right, give me a worst.
All right, I will give you the worst, but it's going to be the blindfold test.
Okay.
And it was an act that we brought into Mark and Brian. And one of the band members, it was the first time I was meeting one of the band members. Now I get it. There's history. There's stuff that went on before you got there. They might have royalty issues with the label. They just might have a problem with music business people in general. But I met this guy, and he shook my hand like it was a dead fish. Like, ew, do I have to? Must I? So that's it. That was probably the worst. But you guys know we brought a lot of artists into Mark and Brian.
Oh, yeah.
Mellencamp was a doll. Mellencamp was wonderful. Yeah. And I think the manager had prepped Mellencamp on who I was and what I was doing. And we had a #1 track at Classic Rock that week. It was when he did his partnership with the truck advertising, Our Country. I don't know if you remember Our Country.
Yeah.
But anyway, he got out of the SUV and just immediately was like, he knew my name, and he said, "Now tell me where I can smoke." It was one of those. Yeah. But he was great, and he delivered. Man, you put an acoustic in Mellencamp's hands, and it's like you're not leaving that room. I mean, that guy's compelling. Yeah. So yeah, too many great experiences and a couple of skin knuckles. Big deal. Would we have traded any of that? Not a chance.
Nope.
No.
And yes, you're right. We worked 24/7. I mean, I felt like if they let you into the building, and that is such a special club, that basically they kind of own you. And I took pride in that like, yeah, I'm going to get on the plane. I'm going to fly out and do morning shows with Scott Shannon in New York City. And I'm going to work with Stuart Copeland, and I'm going to work with Rick Springfield. And I'm going to work with Peter Frampton and the Scorpion guys and Todd Snyder. And, just like you couldn't have tunnel vision. One moment I might be taking Jimmy Cliff or Tom Jones to KCRW, Morning Becomes Eclectic. And the next moment, I've got, the Scorpions out with Bob Coburn, doing Rockline. I mean, it was so exciting. It was like I don't even know how to describe it. I think on my last day at Universal, I sent a note out to our team, our marketing team, and I described it as a nonstop James Bond thrill ride that you just never know what each day would bring. And you just, it was anything but dull.
Yeah. Elliot, it's time, as you know, for the bonus round. So here come the crazier questions.
What was the first concert you went to?
Roy Buchanan, Berkeley Community Theater with my late father. And we were literally in the back row of the balcony. And Roy was sensational. He played a fiery Fender Telecaster, and it was so loud. I think I'm still recovering from it, but he was sensational. And this is 70s.
Yep.
I'd like to throw a bonus round in. Jerry Lee Lewis at the Old Waldorf, San Francisco, California. I think CW probably had plenty of experiences at the Old Waldorf.
Old Waldorf, yep.
Right? I mean, when Jerry Lee came out, he was wearing white patent leather shoes, a pinstripe suit. I mean, he looked like the legend, and the place went bananas. And me and my high school buddy were so young. We got to the show maybe at 5. I don't even know if they served dinner, but we got there so early that if you remember about the Old Waldorf, they had this bench seating. You could literally put your arm on the stage. Like your arm or your elbow would be on the stage. So we're right in front of Jerry Lee's guitar player, who at the time had like a Marshall Stack and a Les Paul. He played so loud. But me and my high school buddy, who was my keyboardist in our high school band, were yelling all the crazy Jerry Lee songs, like, Louis Boogie, Milkshake Mademoiselle. We tried to go deep on it, but that was pretty sensational.
Nice. What's your coolest piece of memorabilia?
I have to think about that for a minute. Probably I have a signed poster for Bang the Burt Burns Story. So this was a screening up in San Francisco. So we had Joel Selvin sign it. We had Brett Burns, and who is Brett is Burt Burns' son. Burt Burns is the great record producer responsible for things like Twist and Shout, the Isley Brothers, songwriter extraordinaire. If you haven't seen the documentary, Bang the Burt Burns Story is wonderful. But I have a foam core poster board of pretty much all the participants. Bob Sarles, who's the co-director, he's responsible for lots of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame films, and he did the most recent Ozzy Osbourne documentary. So I have a foam core board that's signed by all these folks, and just that I was in the room with those guys, not only in the room but able to power it, and power it in conjunction with a world-class publicist like Bob Burles. You can learn a lot from having better talent surround you.
Absolutely.
You have touched on a lot of different avenues of entertainment, and you've dabbled kind of in each. If you were to make a documentary film, what would it be on?
Wow. I have so many affectionate artists, and I've always loved Louis Jordan, the jump blues pioneer. So I would answer that question with a handful of artists. Eddie Cochran, the great rockabilly artists, Come On Everybody, Something Else, Summertime Blues, especially 20 Flight Rock, which of course is the song that Paul McCartney auditioned to join the Beatles with by playing 20 Flight Rock.
And Montrose covered?
Correct. I feel like Eddie is, the well there is so deep, and he was so young when he passed away. He was an early pioneer in overdubbing, like Les Paul will do the multiple guitar thing. Eddie recorded at Gold Star Recorders a good maybe 7 or 8 years before Phil Spector got there. So in the 50s you had Gold Star recording Eddie Cochran, all the session guys, Carol Kay and Hal Blaine, and many of those early pioneering artists. The Hi-Los, the vocal group the Hi-Los would record at Gold Star. But I guess I'm going back to Eddie because he learned how self-taught to overdub guitar work, and he was a great singer. He's in the
performer.
movie. Yes, a sensational rockabilly performer, and toured with Gene Vincent in England, and is in the movie The Girl Can't Help It. So I would probably, do a toss-up between those two. I'm obsessed with Bill Haley. I'm obsessed with a lot of the other sort of early pioneers of rock and roll, and many of them have been given great treatments, but that's a great question, and I'd probably want to get back to you.
Who would you want to meet, Elliot, you've never met?
John Lennon, for sure. Lots of issues there, but just massive natural talent. I've never met Paul McCartney, but I have a crazy story, if you can stand it.
Sure.
So Paul was in Tower Records, and I remember, driving past the Roxy and noting that the Donnas were playing at the Roxy. So somebody could pinpoint this date. And Paul had some sort of event at the Directors Guild, kind of on the other side of Sunset. But I was going to Tower just because I was in a good mood, and it was like a Wednesday night, and I just felt like shopping. And I go into Tower, and this is toward the end. So maybe there's 5 or 6 people in the store. And I get my magazine and maybe a cool import, and I'm standing in line, and there's kind of a twitchy customer guy in front of me. The clerk behind the counter is, young gentleman, tattooed and pierced, but, very capable and doing his thing behind the counter. And there's a well-to-do, well-dressed Beverly Hills couple at the front of the line. They're both wearing black, and, and I'm just seeing their backs. And at one point, the woman kicks back and goes over by the postcard rack, if you remember the postcard rack at Tower. And I thought to myself, well, that looks a lot like Heather Mills. And I thought, oh, that is Heather Mills. So if that's Heather Mills, then, and McCartney is literally like 2 people in front of me in an empty Tower Records with a receipt. Don't ask me why. A receipt like 2 yards long. And he's tapping his charge card on the counter, and he's making jokes with the clerk, and he's saying, "You don't need to see my ID, do you? I'm over 21." so he's in Paul moment, but there's literally 5 people in the store.
Oh my God.
So, and I just look at those hands, and I think of a million things I could say. And I love what you say about Brian Wilson. And I like the way that, Pet Sounds, whatever. Just, what are you going to say to the Picasso of our generation of rock and roll? And I just looked at those hands, and I thought, fixing a hole, Sgt. Pepper, just like, let the guy have his moment. And I did. And, this is just a classic LA moment. The clerk was kind of shuffling around and saying, oh my God, my mom would be freaking out. So, Paul's probably heard it all before.
Right.
Oh God.
Oh yeah.
But, he signs his charge slip. We assume that somebody else came in for his product, which is probably boxes and boxes.
It's people. You got people.
Yeah, but he's paying for them like a good customer. And he heads out. And the guy in front of me that was he just goes, "Hey, can I use your bathroom?" It's just like, so either I think he just wanted to be next to Paul, which is fine, And the parting moment was, I make my purchase and I leave. And, Tower Records, the building's not there anymore. I mean, the building's there, but they're going to pave it for whatever, the new flashy hotel. But, the last parting shot was, Paul and Heather in the, black BMW heading out down the driveway. And some guy going, Paulie, let me get a handshake, and got the handshake, and off into the night he goes, And then later I heard from Rodney Bingenheimer that Paul was indeed at the Directors Guild beforehand and had a nice conversation with both of them. But, that's what you get when you move to Los Angeles.
Yeah.
You just don't know. You might fall into some work. You might, be able to promote something magical. You just kind of got to follow that.
You've lived a good life. And I appreciate the fact that you, appreciate it and enjoy it and have gratitude for it. And, it's all the things that make it all worthwhile, right?
Yeah. And hopefully just getting started, you'd like, we'd like to think that,
No, it's been great. It's been wonderful.
It's great, Elliot. Thank you so much.
Just such a pleasure talking with you and knowing you and seeing you
and working with you, Elliot.
Yes.
All the years.
I love you guys. I love collaborating with you guys.
Even now,
socializing with you guys. It's been a blast, and I'm honored that you asked because I just love what you guys do. I love your aesthetic. With the kinds of artists that you book and the once again, not the tunnel vision thing. I mean, people know your history, the remarkable history with classic rock and Los Angeles radio and the community and the world of music that we love, but you guys are really stretching it and doing some really interesting things. And it's just that's exciting to me.
It's been great to catch up and share this time, and
peace out, Elliot. Thank you.
Love you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you too, buddy.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, we've known Elliot for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
That we worked with Elliot and still do. And he's been kind enough to book some of the people he works with on our podcast. So we thank him for that, of course. And for just being a cool guy and hanging out. He's always one of those ones that just like, let's just have lunch, and jam and talk. And, today we're recording this on a Sunday, and I'll bet you anything he's at a record swap meet somewhere.
Well,
trading
was record store day.
Right. Record store day. He's got a massive collection of great CDs and albums that I think he's had ever since he was a wee child.
Some people might, and I use this term with a lot of affection when I talk about it with music. He's a nerd.
Total music nerd.
And there's nothing like that when you're a nerd speaking to another nerd. I mean, it's just nerdiness, and it's just awesome. It's just like Nirvana. It's the best. And Elliot is one of those people in the same wavelength, and we just adore him and thank him for everything.
Yeah, Elliot, thank you so much. You can follow Elliot on a couple social medias, including Twitter at EK Media Groove or Instagram at PowerJive77.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that you could really give the term groovy to and mean it. And it still has substance, He always says the word groovy, like groovy. But it's like in a groovy way. It's not.
Yeah. He's like a hippie in a modern world, A
modern hippie.
Anyway, check out our show notes on our website. That's www.rockandrollconfessional.rocks, where you can find some cool photos of Elliot that he was kind enough to use on our website. And also you can get connections with his Facebook and LinkedIn pages also there if you want to follow him and see what he's up to, what he's promoting, what he's got going on.
Yeah, and if you need any sort of bizarre record, he's probably got it too.
Yeah.
So,
send him a note. He's always got one eye open looking for stuff.
Yeah. There's so many, shows now with the streaming possibilities that so many people are looking for music for shows. Ask him.
Yeah.
Thank you for supporting the podcast by subscribing wherever you can and by writing a review. We would like that too.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook if you don't mind. And that's it for now, man.
Keep rocking. We got some stuff coming up. All right, kids.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.